really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Thanks for joining me here again for another episode. I'm glad you're here with me today. I'm going to be talking about how to prepare for the worst. And you might have heard the saying, I hear it fairly often, I am hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. And I actually think that's really good wisdom about life, to go through life optimistically hoping that the best of things will happen and always keeping in view the best possible outcome for things, but being realistic enough to know that many times things don't go the way we wish they would. Many times life hands us something different than we were hoping for. And the wisest approach to life is to be prepared for things that happen. And you hear it in every episode. At the end of every episode, in my outro, I always say it. Be ready for whatever life brings you next. And that really is one of my mantras that I try to live by, is how can I be ready at all times for the unexpected things that happen in life? And how can I keep myself in a place where I'm prepared, which is a way of saying being resilient for whatever difficulties life happens to offer, because if you're realistic and you look around you, you can see that life is full of ups and downs, and there are many amazing, wonderful occurrences, but there are also many struggles and challenges that come our way. And it's just part of a normal life to experience those challenges. And I thought of doing this episode because my daughter, at one point, who was listening to one of the podcasts, said to me, how can you be ready for something when you have no idea what it is? You don't have the slightest clue what it is you're preparing for. And so that challenged me a little bit to think and talk about, in general, how do we prepare ourselves for challenges that are unknown to us and unseen to us? And obviously, if I knew that next week I was going to get sick with something, maybe this week I could start to prepare and plan ahead for that event happening. But of course, that's not how life is at all. We almost never have those kind of warnings or premonitions or those kind of assurances about anything that's coming our way. So all these preparations we have for the worst possible outcomes have to be generalized. They can't really be specific to any particular type of event. So I've been thinking about this for a while, about doing an episode on this idea of preparing for the worst or being ready for what might happen. This morning, I was listening to a podcast that was talking about the Enneagram. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram or not, but I'm finding it really fascinating right now. I'm going to read a couple of books about it. So I will talk about it in more detail in a future episode, because I want to learn more, and I'd love to share that with you when I do learn more about it. But let's just say for now, the Enneagram is a way of looking at how people look at the world. And there are 9 different types within the Enneagram. It's much more complicated and deeper than that, but let's just suffice it to say it doesn't really matter that it was the Enneagram that we were talking about, but the woman who was discussing it, who's an expert in the Enneagram, her name is Suzanne Stabile. And she was talking about a new book she's written about the Enneagram and really soul growth, which is something I think about and talk about a lot, and something I'm really working toward, is how to grow my soul. So something she said in this podcast really struck me today, and that's what made me decide, yep, I absolutely need to do this episode and talk about that. So she was mentioning that spiritual practices help us grow our soul, but we don't know what direction our soul is going to grow in necessarily. We do practices that we believe will help us. We just can never foresee the outcome and not know how it's going to help us grow or what the outcome will be. She did mention that we tend to choose practices that are easy for us, that are in our comfort zone. And so she was talking about the Enneagram, for one thing, that people of each type tend to choose practices that fit them really well within their type, but that the practices that will help us grow the most are those practices that are outside the boundaries of our type, that make us feel a little bit uncomfortable, that push us into the realm where we're not so sure of ourselves. And so she mentioned this idea that we need challenges to help us grow, and that life is always going to offer us those challenges. She said the way we do our own part toward transformation is to be ready for it, because she said growth and transformation tend to occur when something old falls away. And we cannot control when or how or what that will consist of. So she said, and I just love this phrase, she said, she always keeps the table set just in case. I just love that image of having the table set for whatever guest might be coming in that day, that might show up at your door, which reminded me of Rumi's guest house meditation. I may have read that here before, but I'm going to read that to you in just a moment. But this idea of keeping the table set, it means that we're willing to be ready for a challenge to come our way, but a challenge that provides us an opportunity to grow. So we work on ourselves to keep our table set and to keep the door open and to keep ourselves ready for the growth that can happen. So let me read The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So, I just love how this poem fits with Suzanne Stabille's advice of keeping the table set. I just love that idea, so that you can always welcome whatever guest shows up at your door with whatever it may be bringing your way. And Suzanne Stabile went on to say that in order to grow toward transformation, we have to be willing to give something up. And she said that's a good question for us to ask ourselves every day. Am I ready to give something up if I'm asked to do that today? So not only do we have to have the table set, and we have to be open to new things and changes and surprises and challenges, but we have to be willing to surrender. We have to be willing to let go of some things from the past that we might be asked to let go of. So it's a challenging task for us to prepare ourselves and to be ready for whatever life might bring us, but it is such a worthwhile practice, because that's how we'll be able to take advantage of the opportunities for growth that come our way. And so in a way, this is a practice that we could work on every single day as part of our spiritual growth, is even taking an assessment. Am I ready today? Is the table set? Am I open-hearted? Am I willing to surrender if I need to? Am I willing to let go of something? And so I created a couple of a couple of practices I just wanted to mention that could be helpful. And one is a meditation based on the guest house poem that I just read. And for this meditation, you just imagine your inner world as a large house with many rooms and a large front door. And whenever you feel ready, you open the front door and you welcome in whichever guests might be waiting outside. You observe each guest as they come in the door and identify who's come to call on you today. Is it sadness, regret, envy, anger, fear? Maybe it's joy. Maybe it's pleasure and happiness and excitement. But who is it that's standing outside your door that day? Are the visitors more positive or more negative? And without judging, just simply notice the visitors that show up, allow them to enter and find a place inside. Then you greet each one of these guests who've come that particular day and invite them to stay as long as needed. Then sit quietly and observe these guests. Of course, these are emotional guests in your inner world, but observe them while you continue to take deep breaths. And you might make note of any kind of strong reactions you're feeling or memories that are returning as you allow these guests into your inner world. And when you feel finished with that, you can end the meditation by opening the door and allowing the guests to leave freely whenever they are ready. And after you do this meditation, I think it's helpful to do some journaling about it. Write about which guests arrived at your door, which emotions have shown up today. Were they willing to come in? And how did you feel when they came in? How did they behave? Were there any problems or disturbances? And then how do you feel now after doing this exercise? Was anything cleaned out? Were you asked to let go of anything? Did the guests take anything with them that left you a little bit more open and clearer inside? And then writing about anything else that you might need to look at after this exercise, anything else that you were being shown through these guests that arrived at the door to your inner world. So that's my recommendation for a little guest house meditation. I think that could be something helpful to take a look at every day as you figure out how to keep the table set so that when those guests arrive, you feel ready and prepared. The next practice that I wanted to recommend is some type of practice for forgiveness, because I think when Suzanne Stabile says you have to be willing to let go of things, I think forgiveness is one of the practices that is required there. Sometimes we have to let go of our own old resentments and our anger from the past, our disappointment over things that didn't work out the way we wanted it to, the grudges that we're carrying, the frustrations we felt, and maybe the recurring patterns that have happened in our lives because we've set ourselves up in a way believing, oh, this always happens to me. This negative thing always happens. These things I want never work out. It always goes badly for me. Sometimes those types of beliefs are things we need to let go of. But oftentimes forgiveness is part of that process. We have to forgive other people. We have to forgive ourselves for choices we've made in the past, for the way we've behaved. We have to be willing to forgive life for the challenges it brought us in the past, and be willing to still receive what life offers us, the guests that life ushers to our door. And again, life may have been harsh with us in the past, and it might take some effort to forgive life for the way it has evolved and unfolded for us. But being willing to embrace what has happened in the past and willing to stay open to what may happen in the future is part of that process, part of letting go and part of forgiving. So keep in mind, as you open up the doors of your guest house and let your emotions in, forgiveness may be one of the action steps that's necessary. So that might be something you need to journal about. Who do I need to forgive? What do I need to forgive? What within myself do I need to forgive? And as you begin to look at that, actually forgiveness begins happening. It's like an unraveling of the resentment that you're carrying that happens gradually over time. But as soon as you recognize, I'm holding on to this tight ball of anger and frustration and disappointment, as soon as you begin to relax it, it actually starts to unravel itself. It's almost as if forgiveness happens in the moment, as soon as you acknowledge that it's necessary and needed. So that's something I recommend that you add to that guest house meditation, is how and where do you need to add in some forgiveness as your letting go process. And then there's a final practice I wanted to talk about, which is the ultimate letting go. Because the thing we fear the most, of course, is having to let go of our own physical existence, having to watch our own bodies age and change over time, and having to watch our health and our youthfulness gradually dissipate and disappear as we move toward death. So in terms of letting go, that's the most difficult thing we have to let go of, is our very physical existence here. And in terms of being prepared for the worst, our death is the most difficult challenge we have to prepare ourselves for. And so this is really the nitty-gritty, because if you can do the work of being prepared for your own death that's one day is going to arrive at your doorstep, honestly, you'll be able to navigate most of the other challenges that life gives you much more easily. So the ultimate reflection is to reflect upon the fact that you're mortal and life is impermanent. Nothing lasts, everything changes. One day you will die, and you don't know when or how or what will bring it about. But that's the ultimate guest, in a sense, your own death, that you have to be prepared for. That's ultimately who you're setting the table for, is your own death. To be ready for death whenever it does arrive. And of course, one of the ways of being ready is to live your life as fully as possible in every moment, because the more you have packed your life full of meaning and depth and love, the more easily you will be able to let your life go when the time comes, because it will be such a rich and purpose-filled, meaningful life that you have had. And you will feel a sense of satisfaction, even though, you may love life so much at that point that it will be painful and hard to let it go, but you will let it go without regret or resentment, because you will know that you did the best with the life that you had. You did everything you could. You got the most out of this life that you possibly could. Ultimately, that's what it's really about, is when you can figure out how to live from your highest self and live your best possible life, as many moments as you possibly can in each day. And of course, you can't do that all the time, and you can't make the most of every single moment. But the more of those special moments you can string together, the more you will experience at the time of your death that it's been good. I've loved every minute of it, and I'm willing now to let it go. I'm willing to let this ultimate change happen. So this is entirely why I recommend practicing for death and thinking about death and preparing for it, is because it really does help us live better right now in this moment, from moment to moment, day to day. it helps us discover the deeper meaning and the deeper purpose, and particularly to discover love, because in my opinion, that's the highest good that we could possibly be here for, is to learn how to love and how to receive love. So having some sort of a practice where you acknowledge impermanence, you acknowledge the fact that nothing lasts, everything changes, and ultimately you acknowledge that you yourself are impermanent. Your physical body will not last forever. There will be a day when the physical body will die. And there is a meditation practice that I think is really powerful and really helpful. This is called the 5 Remembrances meditation from Buddhism, and I have a version that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote and put out for people to use. And so I want to read this because it's so powerful, these 5 remembrances, as something for you to think about each and every day. So these are like mantras that you would say during your meditation, but they can also be things you journal on. You don't have to do all 5 of them in one day. You could have a weekly practice where each day you take one of the remembrances and you focus on that each day of the week. But let me read them to you so you'll know what they are. And I will try to link to a handout of these so that you will have it available to you, that you can download from the show notes for this episode. But if not, you may have to just briefly jot them down as you're listening, or go back and rewind a little bit to listen to them. So the 5 remembrances. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. That's number 1. Number 2, I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. Number 3, I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. Number 4, all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. Number 5, love is the only thing that survives eternally. So, as you listen to these remembrances, it may feel a little bit shocking because oftentimes we discourage people from thinking of things like, I'm of the nature to grow old. I'm of the nature to have ill health. We think of these as negative messages, and we discourage people from having thoughts like that. Don't tell yourself you'll grow old one day. Don't tell yourself you might have ill health. That's a negative message, and you'll be creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what happens in this meditation is that we're actually confronting the ego, which doesn't want to accept any of these realities: growing old, becoming ill, dying. We're actually requiring the ego to look at these realities and these facts of life, and we're teaching ourselves to have equanimity about it, to find a place of peace where I accept these. I remember that these things are true, and I accept that about life. It's okay. I'm not going to escape it. I need to embrace it and allow it to be part of this existence. And then also at the very end, to focus on love as the only thing that survives eternally. So everything else will change. Everything else will fall away. But love will remain. And so if we can keep that as our most important remembrance while we're coping with this discomfort of the ego over the other 4 remembrances and the pain we feel inside us at this reality that nothing lasts and everything changes except love, we can gradually begin to infuse each moment of each day with as much love as possible, since love is the thing that survives eternally. So the love that we generate, that we bring into the world, the love that we channel, that we bring into our own hearts and then radiate out to others, that love will outlast us. It will continue on. And that is the way to have immortality, in a sense, is to contribute our light and love to the light and love of the universe. So these 5 remembrances, while in the beginning it may seem a little bit frightening to think this way and to think these thoughts that feel so negative to us, but the fact that the 5th remembrance is love redeems the entire practice and brings us full circle back to the place where we were meant to be all along. Focus on love. That's set your table with love. Decorate your house, your inner house with love, so that you can be ready for the guests and the challenges that come your way. And the more love you contain inside, the more prepared you will be for whatever does happen and whatever does come to you. And however difficult and challenging it may be. So I hope these practices are helpful for you as you think about preparing for the worst and keeping your table set, keeping your door unlocked, keeping your house ready and open for whichever guests show up today. And I hope you find it helpful. Be sure and join me again next week, because I'll be back with some more thoughts to share. And so until then, remember that we are here for love. That's the only thing that survives eternally. So face your fear. Be ready, as I always say, for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your very precious and fleeting life. Bye-bye.